Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to start with a new topic, middle and emerging powers. So countries such as Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, India, Japan, South Africa, they are emerging in the international arena post-Cold War era. And these middle powers, they are influencing the international politics in diplomatic and innovative way via mediating methods such as consensus building, rapport building, confidence building measures, providing the middle power gap, providing leadership to coalitions and groups, handling the second and third agendas. So इस तरह के they are playing a lot of roles. फिर सवाल आता है what how to define middle and emerging power. So this term it is subjective and even misleading, and there are many criteria for its definition. So this let's look at these definitional issues. So middle power as a category, it suffers from normative defects, which means how to define it. And it is difficult to define this term neatly. And since this concept is somewhat loose and problematic, scholars they have used different criteria to define middle powers. So some may define them on the basis of their size, their economic capacity, their military capability, their diplomatic clout, the economic arsenal. But um, let's see those criteria one by one. And then there are two caveats. First, that adding to the problem of defining them or quantifying them, there is another problem that all the middle power they do not behave in the same fashion. They may have different resources, different style and context of foreign policies. And then with time, with the changing international dynamics, some countries may gain or lose their status as a middle power. So ये एक और समस्या है. So let's proceed on to major approaches to understand middle powers. So first, importance of position. So it is most common to define a middle power by its position in international hierarchy. And these middle power are set to those that occupy those middle point in range of bigness and smallness, or middle position in the international hierarchy, which is usually measured by reference to quantifiable attributes such as area, population, size, complexity, strength of the economy, military capability, and other comparable factor. इसका मतलब है position का that middle position, especially we are talking about a hierarchy. जब कोई top पे होगा तभी तो कोई middle पे होगा. And then if you are on middle, there will be someone who is lower than you, that uh, lower than or occupying a less favorable position than you. You may call them smaller states. So hierarchy को तो है ही. Then this middle power can be defined on the basis of such middle quantifiable attributes. For example, अगर हम area की बात करते हैं, we are quantifying countries or we are numbering countries on the basis of this attribute area. फिर जो बड़ी size में होगी, they will be on the top, like Russia, America. फिर जो बहुत ही छोटी countries होंगी, Nauru, ये सब they will be occupying the lowest pedestal. And then जो middle size में जो हमारे जैसी countries हैं, India, Japan, South Africa, ये सब middle rungs में आएंगी. Then if you take into account the strength of the economy, अब वो भी एक factor होता है. Then again we are looking at a hierarchical ladder. So उस ladder में the top economies like US and China, they are multi-trillion economy. Then middle rungs में जो countries occupying 1 to 5 trillion, India, Japan, Brazil. Then lowest में है बाकी सब. So this is the meaning of this term, importance of position in terms of middle powers. And then in this first approach, importance of position, middle powers are sometimes equated with medium or intermediate powers. वो भी ठीक है. Then this approach has its own problem, which is how to work out quantifiable measures of power, because power is an abstract term, and it is difficult to quantify or measure any abstract entity. Then let's take a look at the second approach, which is based upon place of geography. So others, by contrast, they have suggested that middle power are derived from states' geography. So a middle power is someone or something, a state that is physically located in the middle between a system of great powers. It can be a proximate position to that of a great power. पहला तो ये हो सकता है proximate position, it means it is situated near to the place of a great power. So यहाँ पे हम बात करते हैं यूएस की बात करते हैं तो मैक्सिको is one such entity. फिर अगर हम यूरोपियन यूनियन की बात करते हैं या पूरे यूरोप की बात करते हैं तो मोस्ट ऑफ द कंट्रीज दे आर सिचुएटेड नियर बाय. सो फ्रांस की बात करते हैं तो फ्रांस के साथ में यू कैन टेक स्पेन, इटली, जर्मनी. तो ये तो हो गया प्रॉक्सिमेट डायमेंशन. देन सेकंड dimension is about strategy, meaning it may be situated strategically at a strategically important junction. So in that case, that particular state is going to be powerful within its geographical regions. तो हम इंडिया की बात कर सकते हैं. India, it is situated at a junction between the east and the west, and is overlooking a vast expanse of ocean. That ocean that handles around 67% of trade by volume. So ये position है, it is a strategic position, and that's why India exerts a strong influence in the South Asian region. Then the third variant, which was common during the Cold War period, it suggested that middle powers are those that occupy some kind of middle position ideologically between the polarized great power. So those powers that included neutral and non-aligned states such as India, Sweden, Yugoslavia. And this definition, it is reference to the period of Cold War, and वो अब period अब नहीं है, then this definition will not work out. But एक idea के लिए it is important. Then this criteria of size and geography that have been used to describe countries, it may be equated to regional powers. So regional powers are those that are predominant in their respective sub-regions or in their geographical proximity. But such geographical dominance, it need not turn into a middle power equation. So being predominant, they are able to influence the course of events in their proximate region, but they do not exhibit many attributes which are conflated with middle power terminology. Then let's have a look at the normative approach. So the third approach, which is widely accepted, is the normative view of middle powers. So according to this view, middle powers are potentially wiser and more virtuous than the state position either above them or below them. So they are, uh, in a sense, cool-headed, virtuous middle rungs of international orders. Again, I repeat it. They are perceived as cool-headed, virtuous middle rungs of the international order. Cool-headed in the sense that they do not show, they do not portray the hot fusion, the hot-headedness that is associated with great powers. इससे होता है, like you may be aware about the rivalry that is going on between the US and China for many years. अब यहाँ पे both the states ये चाहें, they can easily find a way out, but because of their hegemonic tendency and because of the lust for dominance, they are still staring at each other without blinking. So, in that sense, uh, such propensity or such behavior, it is not seen, especially among the middle powers. Then, when this normative approach talk about the virtuosity or being the virtuous nature of middle power, it means these countries they are especially uh, relying on democratic and liberal principle. Especially अगर कोई agenda है, कोई issue है, so they seek dispute resolution on democratic lines. Then their liberal and internationalist approach, they especially talk about strengthening the UN system or the strengthening the international order. So all in all, they are generally thought of as the good international citizens, especially the middle powers such as Australia and Canada, which claim that their foreign policy are inspired and infused with liberal internationalism. Then, in the normative view, middle powers are thought to be trustworthy. That's why I said they are hailed for their virtuosity, their virtuous nature, and they are considered trustworthy because they can exert diplomatic influence without the likelihood of recourse to force. और इसका मतलब है same. They show cool-headedness while approaching their friends and foe alike. So यहाँ पे it is given that they can exert diplomatic influence without the likelihood of recourse to force. So it means if they are perceived as such who do not who do not take the recourse of force or military force, it means it is indirectly mocking the great power who usually show up their arms wherever they're dealing with their friends and foes. So it is also an indirect attack at the hegemonic influence of the major powers. That if they want to exert a stronger influence, this hegemonic tendency it needs to mellow down. So anyway, this cool-headedness which is seen here, that वो जो है उनका जो diplomatic clout है, it can influence decisions, it can exert influence, and they are also perceived that they are cool-headed. They will not resort to war or military tactics to gain an advantage, and they also have a good past record of conduct and contribution to the working of international system. That's why they have earned some good credibility in the international affairs. Then this normative view, it also has its own difficulties. जैसे अभी इनके virtuosity, इनकी virtues की बात की, so it is believed that they will take high moral grounds on many uh, issues or issues on humanitarian ground, but their actual conduct it does not always stand close scrutiny, which means they may boast about their virtuous nature, they may boast about the principle on which their foreign policies are attributed, they may talk about uh, the virtues or the principles along which they are likely to stand by. But international arena, as you know, it's anarchical, or कभी कभी principle से हट के you take a different stand because you are a pragmatic, you are a practical man, and you need to find a way out, and sometimes those practical way it may mean going against your own words. So they may take moral ground, but the actual conduct it may differ. So example here, Australia and Canadian rhetoric on Kuwait's sovereignty in the Gulf conflict of 1991 which means during the uh, Gulf crisis of 1991, Australian and Canadian diplomats they criticized Kuwait's sovereignty and its tactics. But later on, when Indonesia was invaded and East Timor was annexed in 1975, they stayed silent. So here, अगर उन वो अपने वर्च्यूज की बात करते हैं, अपने प्रिंसिपल्स की बात करते हैं, then they should have stood by, they should have spoken against both these instances about against Indonesia's invasion and annexation of East Timor, but they stayed silent because in both the ground they needed to fall in line according to the whims of the US and the major European powers, and which was a practical approach, but yet it exposed their folly. Then the second difficulty with the normative approach is that it tends to exclude a wide variety of states because जो criteria है normative approach का, it is idealism and virtuosity. But the proclaimed idealism and virtuosity, both of them cannot be normative basis of middle power category. अगर इनको हटा दें, then you can also involve Iran, Turkey, many nations of South Africa, African continent. Even you may take many countries of Southeast Asia. अगर ये बात नहीं करते हैं तो अगर ये पैरामीटर नहीं है तो then one also notices that such like-minded good international citizens are all developed northern states of middle size. So again ये ये folly, ये flaw इसमें expose हो गया है. At first the definition it is based on idealism and virtuosity, which is uh, an attribute that is associated with the white power, the powers of the European countries, and then most of these countries, most of these good citizens, they also belong to the developed countries, especially the Canada, the Netherlands, the Norway, the Sweden. But if they can increase the canvas, if they can broaden the canvas, then many states such as Argentina, Brazil, Egypt, Hungary, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, Poland, from all the continents, they can be included in this club. Then let's have a look at the fourth approach to define the middle powers. So behavioral approach, it is defining countries on the basis of their diplomatic behavior. So this fourth approach or the behavioral approach, it pays more attention to a particular behavior associated with middle powers. And according to this approach, middle powers, they strongly pursue multilateral solution to international problem. Multilateral solution, it means they are they are invoking multilateral and multilateral institutions to resolve the disputes instead of taking any direct or militaristic approach. So जैसे अगर agriculture disputes हैं तो they are invoking the institutions of WTO. फिर अगर there is a talk of there is a issue of um, crime against humanity, then they are invoking the rights of International Criminal Court. फिर अगर यही climate change की बात हो रही है, then they are working on United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is UNFCCC, the Paris Climate Accord. So all in all, they are pursuing multilateral solutions. Then they embrace compromise and work to build consensus position in international disputes. So again, जो next behavior है middle powers का, that they tend to build consensus on international issues. So whether it is about climate change or terrorism, climate change हो गया, terrorism हो गया, financial issues हो गए, इन सब में they are seeking building consensus because अगर this is Earth और इस पे जितने भी planets हैं, first सिर्फ हम ही हैं, फिलहाल जितना भी वर्ल्ड हमने देखा है, सिर्फ हम ही हैं जो यहाँ पे हैं, हमारे अलावा कोई और है नहीं। सो अगर हमें ही धरती पे रहना है एंड वी नीड टू लिव टुगेदर इन पीस, देन most of the agreements, most of the disputes and most of the issues, they need to be resolved in a peaceful and agreeable way, an amicable way. और वो कब होगा? जब you are sitting together, you are negotiating, you are building consensus. And the last, their behavior is guided by a belief in their technical and entrepreneurial ability to fulfill such roles. So, the noted Canadian diplomat and scholar W. H. Holmes, he has described it as the functional resource for effective performance of middle power roles. He is talking about technical and entrepreneurial abilities. So the fourth parameter, it is about the actual capability of the middle powers, which lies in the technical and entrepreneurial range. So in both the counts, middle powers जितने भी नाम लिए हैं, South Africa, India, Brazil, Japan, and many more that to be included, all of them, they possess one one or a couple of such or a set of such abilities. And those abilities, अगर टेक्निकल की बात करते हैं, then let's say इंडिया के पास इसरो है, जापान के पास एडवांस मिलिट्री टेक्नोलॉजीज हैं, and it's also the greatest contributor to international aid. So Japan is an aid giver. फिर और बात करते हैं, ब्राज़ील की बात करते हैं, तो एग्रीकल्चर कमोडिटीज की उसमें it is playing a good role. South Africa in mineral resources. Then entrepreneurial की बात करते हैं, it is about entrepreneurship, and which is about the rise of the private persona. And private persona, as you know, कि हर एक person in his or her best of capabilities, they can play a very sizable role. एक एग्जांपल लेते हैं, let's talk about the owner of Tesla, Elon Musk. Then यही हम जेफ बेजोस की बात कर लेते हैं, या जितने भी टेक्निकल ब्रेक थ्रूज हैं जो आज के टाइम में हम देख रहे हैं, इवन एआई की बात करते हैं, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस की बात करते हैं, नैनो टेक्नोलॉजी की बात करते हैं, क्वांटम फिजिक्स की बात करते हैं, सुपर कंडक्टर्स की बात करते हैं, तो इनके साथ जो भी एसोसिएटेड नोटेबल एमिनेंट पर्सन्स हैं, they are playing that great role. They are playing the role of informal actors, and these abilities, uh, these are the way by which they can influence uh, the whole arena, the whole international system. Then let's talk about general attributes of middle power behavior. So पूरे डिस्कशन में we have figured it out that there is no one scientific definition of middle power, and then all middle powers, they do not behave in the same fashion. So their behavior has been dynamic, or at least far from static. So as the international system has changed, we have seen dramatic modifications in the behavior of these emerging and middle powers. So let's look at those attributes. First one is middle power are not great powers. It is not because they do not have the military capabilities or the economic strength of the great power. In reality, in terms of size, military capabilities, economic development level, a middle power may not be very different from a great power. So we just take two examples. One belongs to Japan, second one is Germany, and we can take another example of India. अगर इन तीनों की we talk about their different clouds, it means different jurisdictions, different areas of influence clouds. So अगर financial cloud देखें, all of them are financially in healthy position. Japan, Germany, and India. Then, in terms of size of population, there may be variations. And in when we talk about the technical competence, so Japan and Germany both are industrial houses of the world. एंड उसी में इंडिया की बात करते हैं. इंडिया इज फेयरिंग ग्रेट ऑन सॉफ्टवेयर एंड सर्विसेज. फिर डिप्लोमेटिक क्लाउड की बात करते हैं. ऑल दीज कंट्री दे एंजॉय डिप्लोमेटिक प्रेस्टीज ऑन इंटरनेशनल लेवल. सो मिलिट्री कैपेबिलिटी में मिडिल पावर आर नॉट एनी वे लेस देन द मेजर पावर. यस, इनमें कुछ नंबर्स में, कुछ फिगर्स में दे विल बी डिफरेंसेस. अगर यही बात करते हैं the financial clout of the US versus the financial clout of Japan to that of Japan, तो differences हैं. इंडिया के साथ देखें differences हैं. डिप्लोमेटिक पर्सनल काउंट का अगर देखें उसमें भी काफ़ी differences है, but those differences are not that sizable, which means अगर इंटरनेशनल अरीना पे प्रेजेंस की बात करें, सिर्फ डिप्लोमेटिक क्लाउड की बात करते हैं, so India may have less personnel, but its area of influence, its cloud, it is not uh, diminishing. So अगर वही पैरामीटर लें कि डिप्लोमेटिक इन्फ्लुएंस कितना है, then India exerts comparably sound diplomatic influence in international system. But अगर और दूसरे पैरामीटर्स की बात लेते हैं, क्वांटिफिएबल मेजर्स की बात करते हैं, मेजरेबल एट्रीब्यूट्स की बात करते हैं, तो साइजेबल डिफरेंसेस हैं. बट जो सिर्फ पावर रेंज की बात करते हैं, बिकॉज वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द डेफिनेशन ऑफ मिडिल पावर, सो इन पावर रेंज देयर इज नथिंग टू बी वरी अबाउट. फिर हम सेकेंड एट्रीब्यूट की बात करते हैं. उससे पहले यस, जो लास्ट में देखा था, दे आर नॉट, उनकी पावर इतनी कम नहीं है, and they do not have that diminished status, but they are not small power either. The countries perceive themselves as middle powers and position themselves in the international system so as to view it differently. इसका मतलब है the middle powers हैं वो they have conditioned themselves according to their own needs and their own perception of the world system. It's like the niche which can you fill up, a void that you need to fill up, and the void for which you are suitable. तो ये तो जनरली इन कॉमन पार्लेंस लाइफ में भी हम देखते हैं. हर कोई सिविल सर्वेंट नहीं बनता, हर कोई आईएएस नहीं बनता, कुछ आईपीएस भी बनते हैं, कुछ टीचर्स भी होते हैं, कुछ मिलिट्री के अंदर भी जाते हैं, कुछ डॉक्टर्स भी होते हैं, एंड इवन में भी डॉक्टर्स हैं तो कुछ नर्सेज भी हैं, कुछ पैरामेडिक्स भी हैं, कुछ ग्रुप डी स्टाफ भी है, फिर कुछ बिजनेसमैन भी है. सो ऑल इन ऑल, you look at all your own capabilities, you analyze them, you introspect about your own strength and weakness, and then you come out with the position or a void or a niche that you can fill. So middle power, they are niche filling countries. Then second attribute, middle power are multilateralist. So at its core, the concept of middle power diplomacy, it signifies a certain type and certain content of foreign policy based on attachment to multilateral institution and a collaborative world order. So इस पैसेज का मतलब है, let's take example of WHO, World Health Organization. So एक common person के लिए भी it is not difficult to understand that World Health Organization, by its very name, it is an umbrella organization for all the scenes and situations that are related to health. So एक health umbrella organization of the world is WHO. अब जो COVID-19 थी, all the middle power they have talked about, they have uh, tried to seek the services of WHO, और even उनके बारे में जो middle powers हैं, they also talk about how to enrich the WHO so that it can contain this particular virus, and it's all the necessities, like to work it, it needs finances, it needs material and administrative powers. So those finances and powers, they need to be given to it so that it can work effectively. So in that sense, they were most of the middle power, they are multilateralists. And दूसरा एग्जांपल लेते हैं इवन यूएन का. So most of the middle power, by their multilateral outlook, they always try to strengthen the existing system. मतलब यूएन को हटाना नहीं है, you can reform it, you can provide it with some good teeth so that it can take action against the dominant and the weak power alike. Then middle powers are capable of systemic impact. So this term, it evokes caution, equivocalness, and issue-specific activism, even leadership. So it calls for an agile and flexible form of statecraft on top of a firm sense of international commitment. इस पैसेज का मतलब है that middle power, जैसे आपको बताया है कि they are not in any way less than the great power in terms of financial, diplomatic, and material power. So they are equally capable of exerting all such influences. But in international arena, they are also capable of systemic impact by their inherent behavior. जो हम जिनकी बात कर रहे हैं, जितने भी behavior है, and वो behavior, it may be related to caution, equivocalness, which means giving equal right to say, equal right to speak, and then issue specific activism, so that they do not fall into any cold war trap, like to join ये ग्रुप ज्वाइन करना है, वो ग्रुप ज्वाइन करना है, नहीं. इशू स्पेसिफिक एक्टिविज्म है, देन दे कैन टॉक अबाउट, दे कैन deliberate upon that particular issue. Let's say terrorist, अब टेररिज्म की बात करते हैं या न्यूक्लियर नॉन प्रोलिफरेशन की बात करनी है, तो इट इज अ स्पेसिफिक इशू, और सिर्फ उसी इशू पे बात की जाए. उस इशू पे बात करने के लिए बाकी जितने भी जो इंटरनेशनल multilateral or bilateral relationship, they should not be affected, and they are also capable of providing leadership to such cloud. So जैसे इंडिया के भी बहुत सारे इनिशिएटिव्स हैं लुक ईस्ट एंड एक्ट ईस्ट पॉलिसीज में, जैसे बिम्स्टेक हो गया, एंड इंडियाज प्रेजेंस इन शार्क हो गया, क्वाड हो गया. तो ये सब भी बताता है कि द मिडिल पावर, दे आर केपेबल ऑफ लीडिंग ग्रुप्स एंड कोलिशंस. देन उनके इसी बिहेवियर के लिए दे नीड and an agile and flexible form of statecraft, with the statecraft that ensure or keeps a strong sense of international commitment. So middle power, by their very nature, they will stay in the middle position, with the position that is covetedly secured by them, और वो position it will stay intact only if ऊपर वाली और नीचे वाली positions जो हैं वो रहती है. If the higher and the lower positions are there, only then they will be called the middle powers, which is their secured area. So अगर international commitment होगा, then their statecraft, it is about handling the affairs by middle eyes, or looking through the middle lens, और वो statecraft, it needed to be agile and flexible. It does not need to um, look all the issues through militaristic or security angles, or even dominance and hegemonic angles. And hegemonic angle, और इसका हम मिडिल पावर का एक देख सकते हैं, like जब चाइना in its quest to assert itself as a global power, it tried to squeeze some pain points, some pressure points, or India, it's a proximate neighbor. So India को अगर प्रेशराइज करते हैं तो it can mean to sending a message to the globe, to the international powers, that India should not be taken lightly. It should not be taken as granted. क्योंकि if someone um, can get on the nerves of India, that country might have some nerves of its own. In other words, only a strong power can pressurize a strong power, another strong power. और इस चाइना इंडिया के केस में दिस इशू वाज रियली you know a diplomatic failure, diplomatic and you can say a strategic failure on the count of India, because India should have known that such neighbors that are growing in their political cloud, that are exerting and increasing their influence, they need not be trusted. And especially India has burnt its finger once in during the 1962 war. उस time भी it was deliberate failure, deliberate strategic failure. लेकिन अगर चाइना के काउंट में अगर देखें, चाइना की तरफ से it is a blunder which may not appear, which may not be visible right now because it's expanding its footprints, but later on, क्योंकि the whole world history it is rampant with such expanding and deteriorating empires. It's like coming and going of empires, or the rise and fall of empires. कुछ भी कोई भी terms use कर सकते हैं. The hero of once will turn to dust one day. वो भी क्योंकि इंटरनेशनल अरीना पे, ग्लोबल लेवल पे, टू कीप योर पावर इंटैक्ट इट नीड्स लॉट. And the agile and flexible diplomacy of or agile and flexible statecraft is one such attribute that that can help any country, any dominant or hegemonic country, to maintain its position. But China is not showing any such attributes. It's like uh, it is thinking on emotional lines. Then middle powers have their own way of doing things, and their strength lies in pursuing accommodation, consensus, and voluntarism. ये सब तो हम देख ही चुके हैं, अभी तक समझ में आ गया that they are seeking togetherness, they are seeking deliberation, they are seeking resolution of issues on democratic lines. So they are multilateralist and good international citizens, but it is not necessarily always acting this way. Only in norm-based multilateral international system, middle power can play their due roles and check the arbitrary and unilateral tendency of great powers. But it is not necessarily the usual case. कुछ जो उनके अपने challenges हैं, even the inherent threat to their power, उसमें they can come into the survival mode. अगर very during the very basis of their national security, जैसे इंडिया के केस में या किसी भी country केस में, if they are being torn by any other country, torn and tormented by any other country, then it becomes a nationalist issue. It becomes a security threat. फिर उसमें then ये multilateral या ये सब जो है ये conduct, it might not be resorted. Then the third attribute, middle power, they are functional powers. So functionalism, it means they have comparative advantage in certain specific area. They have requisite resources and skills in select area where they can make a difference in the functioning of international system. So these resources and specialized skills, they are not uniform to all the middle powers, and nor do they remain constant. So in a way, this niche diplomacy, or you can say niche functionalism, is a set of roles that are played by these middle powers, and they such roles they could be in the area of international peacekeeping, in the mediation, in the efforts of counterterrorism, in the alleviating the impacts of global warming, in resolving the global health crisis. ये सब जो सिस्टम है इसमें middle power they really play a contributory role, a commanding role. Then these functional middle power they are able to check the unilateral tendency and coercive behavior which is generally associated with the foreign policy of big powers, which means वो उनकी functional power उनके competence से they can hold back the unilateral tendency of big power, the hegemonic influence of big power, and their middle range capabilities also allow them to pursue called niche diplomacy जो अभी बताया, and they are good international citizens. They are good in building consensus or building coalitions which carry a lot of weight and credibility in the international system, and they are unlikely to subordinate their coalition partner to their own needs. Then the difference between small power and the middle power वो ये है कि even small power could have issue specific comparative advantage. ये हो सकता है कोई छोटा सा देश है उसके पास भी बहुत कुछ हो सकता है, स्पेशली द मिडिल ईस्टर्न द ऑयल रिच कंट्रीज, अब उनके पास भी एक तरह से फाइनेंशियल एंड स्ट्रेटेजिक क्लाउट है उनके पास, स्ट्रेटेजिक वेपन है उनके पास, बट what what separates them from the middle power is that middle power alone are capable of holding on their own in the international system which is dominated by great powers. जैसे इंडिया की बात करते हैं, इंडिया, जापान, ब्राजील, साउथ अफ्रीका, they have the necessary resources, the technical competence, the military apparatus जिसके according they can survive on their own even if one of the great power they go rogue on them. Then they are able to marshal necessary resources to back up their commitments. Middle powers they do not suffer capability commitment gap which smaller powers generally do. So this capability commitment gap is agar middle power it committed something, it is interested in some agenda, maybe it's about agenda of climate change, let's talk about the Montreal Protocol, which is about phasing out chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. So this phasing out of chlorofluorocarbon, CFCs, it is a binding target. अब ये commitment, if you ratify it, you need to eliminate the required quantity of CFC from the system. अब यहाँ पे एक और difference is highlighted between the powers of small countries and middle countries, which is middle powers they can fulfill the commitment. They have the capability to walk by the talk, which small powers generally cannot do. So these middle powers they are invariably committed to broadening and maximizing what is called Gaussian perspective in the international politics, which means promoting the rule of law, dialogue, and consensus building. So this Gaussian perspective, which is about which is which treads line on the liberalist line about democratic principles, about liberal principles, especially rule of law, dialogue, confidence building, consensus building, all such, and middle power are especially capable of fulfilling their commitment to such an perspective. Then let's talk about concluding observation on middle power. So this is the summary. Scholars have pointed out that there are other roles which are common in varying degree in all middle powers, which are roles of regional or sub-regional leadership, functional leadership, role of system stabilizers, negative roles such as fast follower and fence sitters roles as good international citizens, then other scholars they have also differentiated middle power in terms of their ability to keep distance from power politics, which is a degree of autonomy in their foreign policies and support for international status quo and stability and a commitment to gradual reform of the international system. ये सब जितने भी attributes हैं, they are especially aligned with the concept of middle powers. In sum, this middle power powermanship uh, can be defined by the expression which is coined by W.H. Holmes is a set of behavior, or better described, this middle powermanship. It is a process that is always responding to emerging exigencies, which means emerging situations. In short, it is talking about this middle powermanship. It can be equated or associated with flexibility in the statecraft. Then W.H. Holmes he suggested that the term should remain ambiguous and mystical, the definition of middle power. And this ambiguity it should be there for right reasons. And those reasons that this ambiguity it enables middle power to suitably modify their roles and advance their perceived political objective and diplomatic style in international system. So this anonymity, this autonomy, and this ambiguity, all of them, they are inherent in the definition of middle powers. That's why they are middle, some kind of coveted and hidden behavior. And they are also prone to behave in all sort of ways. Then the final thing, what is difference between the middle power and the great power is that middle power cannot do some of the things that the great power can do. And in a way, they are also uh, capable of doing certain things which smaller powers cannot. So, which means the role of great power also have their own niche, their own areas of influence, which cannot be filled by the middle powers. Let's talk about the UN system. So great powers such as the USA, and the European Union, they have strong political, diplomatic, militaristic, and financial presence in the UN, and they can influence its decisions. They can influence the decision of Security Council and their negotiations, their um, administrative affairs. It also hold strong presence in the Secretariat of United Nations, and even uh, the United Nations and many European countries, especially the EU, European Union, they are able to contain many such rogue states, let's say many terrorist organizations, which middle power are certainly not capable to do. So this is it. Thank you very much.